Because you never find a remedy that's going to cover everything in a person's life.
Right.
You know, when I meet a person, I sit and talk to them for 2 hours. In fact, you know, I try to get to know them as well as possible on many, many different levels. Physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
And then I put together this picture. We call it their state. And I try to understand that, integrate that understanding together to make one coherent picture. And then find a remedy which matches that picture. That's the whole ball game.
Yeah.
And if you find the right remedy, then you can do absolutely remarkable things. But we always try to find what's called the characteristic symptom. We do that on a small scale and on a large scale. For instance, if you came in and you said, I have a fever, okay, and you said, I have a fever and I like to drink cold water, right, and my head is hot, and I'm sweating. All those are very common symptoms of a fever, right? Nothing unusual. But if you came in and said, I have a fever and I want to drink really, really hot water, that makes me feel really good with my fever, that's characteristic because it's weird.
Yeah, right.
The more unusual it is, the more sort of absurd it is, the more important. And that leads to another point, because really what we're looking at, what we're trying to find out is something called the vital force, or the nature of the vital force of that particular person at that particular time. So one of the underlying premises, which is true of all true holistic medicines, whether it's acupuncture or homeopathy or hands-on healing, or massage, or any type of real holistic alternative medicine, is that what at the core of a human being is this type of energy. It's somewhat abstract or non-physical. But the core of a human being is not just flesh and bones. There's something deeper. And Hahnemann called it the vital force, the dynamic principle. Acupuncture, they call it qi, or in Oriental medicine, they call it different things. People can call it many different things, but basically, it's this dynamic, vital energy.
You know, I hadn't really thought about this component of homeopathy before, but in terms of the, I mean, I always kind of thought of the vital force as being essentially, you know, the same for everybody, but it sounds like you're saying that they aren't, or it expresses itself differently.
It expresses itself differently in different people. That's why when you walk into a room with people, you don't have to be a homeopath to know. You walk into you're at work, you have a conference, and there are 10 people sitting around the table. You know every person's energy is different. And as you get to know them and work with them, you know you have to deal with them differently. So they're expressing their vitality, their energy. And their preferences in food, their preferences in clothing, the way they like to lead their life, the type of illnesses they get, that's all part of that state that I was talking about. And that's what we try to get to know. Whether it's in an acute state or in a chronic state. You have a kid who's brought in with an earache. Mom brings the kid in. Now, from a conventional point of view, the kid's got an infection in the ear. Look in the ear, it's red. Give some antibiotics, see you later. 5 minutes is easy, right? But first kid's brought in from a homeopath's perspective, and the kid's just curled up in the mother's arm and whimpering and very shy and, you know, what's some, right?
It doesn't sound like my kids.
Well, they're all different, right? So that type of nature with the earache points to one type of remedy. The next kid comes in screaming and shouting, back is arched, hitting the mother, maybe throwing things.
There you go. That's
your kids, right? They need a totally different remedy, even though if you look in the ear, it's the exact same disease.
It's interesting.
Right? Third kid comes in, he's like, I'm a tough guy, I'm stoic. Nothing bothers me. Might have the worst pain of all of them. He needs a different remedy. And I could, you know, we could make up however many examples, we could think of personalities. But each one is expressing that disease and that illness in a different way. And they might have different food cravings. One kid desires spicy things, one kid when they got the ear infection, got really thirsty. The next kid got thirstless. We look at all these changes. Each one's expressing a difference in the energetic state of the person. That's what we look for. So the second part of homeopathy is to understand this energetic principle, because without that, you're lost. If you try to do homeopathy by just thinking of a disease name and choosing a medicine, you're hopeless.
Yeah.
You'll never get it. And that's where a lot of people have difficulty with homeopathy, because they think, well, I've got a sinusitis, give me a sinus medicine. You go to the health food store and you see these sinus medicines, homeopathic sinus medicines.
Right.
But they're not classical, because they're not dealing with the individual nature. They're just a bunch of homeopathic remedies which have been known to have some type of connection to sinusitis, and they throw them all together in a big stew and they make one medicine out of them. That's different than treating the whole person.
Yeah. You know, I guess one of the things that I feel, and you certainly touched on this, is that that homeopathy is kind of a counterintuitive philosophy in many ways. And there are a couple that come to mind, and one of them, you've touched on it, is the notion of symptoms and how homeopathy contends with symptoms as opposed to conventional medicine.
Right. Well, I would have to begin by saying that we don't even contend with symptoms. Symptoms aren't things to contend with. They're not our enemies.
Right.
Okay, that's the basic, that's the crux of the matter.
Right.
Symptoms are an expression of the vital force. Right? So we don't want to quash symptoms.
Right.
We don't want to treat symptomatically. We want to stimulate the vital force so that it will resolve the symptom. Okay? If you take any medicine and you use it only to stop a symptom, I tell this to patients all the time. It's like when a child comes to you and they're crying, you tell it to shut up. You might get the kid to stop crying really fast, but you're going to have
sooner or later.
There's going to be a big payback later on.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is understand that symptom. And we want to understand why is the vital force producing this symptom. And how can we encourage the vital force to remove it. Now that might sound sort of, airy-fairy or touchy-feely, but you can do that with cholera, and you can do that with the plague, and you can do that with migraines, and you can do that with many, many diseases, many autoimmune diseases. Most anything. If you get the right remedy, you can find some remarkable things. So this is my homeopathic pharmacy. Contains, at this point, thousands of little vials like this. And in each of these vials are pellets. Sometimes they're liquid, but mostly they're pellets of highly diluted substances. And what makes homeopathy distinct, different than vitamins and supplements and other types of naturopathic medicines, is that we're using these highly diluted substances. They're energetic substances, diluted to the point where the original substance is actually no longer present.